Tinderbox is the seventh album by British punk band Siouxsie and the Banshees. Released April 21st, 1986 by Polydor Records in the UK and by Geffen Records here in the States. Since the band's formation in 1976, the only consistent members have been vocalist Susan Ballion, best known now as the icon Siouxsie Sioux, and bassist Stephen Bailey, who adopted the moniker Steve Severin, a reference to the novel Venus and Furs, or more likely the Velvet Underground song of the same name. The two had met at a Roxy Music concert a year prior, connecting over a shared love of glam rock and later the Sex Pistols, a band whose shows they attended as part of its influential following, a group the media coined the Bromley Contingent.
Wonderful people.
Have you tried to get there, Donna?
Yeah, I did the 100 Club, the punk festival. Siouxsie and the Banshees.
When the duo were given an opportunity to perform themselves, they would hastily assemble a band to play their first show at the 100 Club Punk Special held in Oxford Street, London on the 20th and 21st of September 1976. A 20-minute improvisation containing the Lord's Prayer, with figureheads such as Sid Vicious on drums and Marco Perroni on guitar filling in as temporary members. This performance cemented the band as fixtures of the emerging punk music scene, elevating them from followers to curators of the movement. After the addition of guitarist John Mackay and drummer Kenny Morris into the group as official members, the band was signed and released their seminal album The Scream in 1978, and its follow-up Join Hands just a year later. However, this lineup dissolved rather quickly.
The tour that followed was fraught with difficulties. Matters came to a head at a record signing in a shop in Aberdeen.
We walked into the record shop and they were playing Join Hands. John immediately took it off and put the Slits album on, which had come out the same week, because he couldn't bear to hear it again. So Siouxsie got, her hackles were rising already. And we started signing a few things. And then Polydor basically made the mistake of not actually supplying the shop with enough records. So Nils had a box of promo albums in the back of the van.
And they were stamped with gold, not for resale. So I presumed that we were just going to hand a few out on the way around the tour, not all in the record shop, but just on the way around the tour, hand a couple of hours promotional copies, which may have been naive, but that's what I thought.
And as soon as John Mackay saw that it was being sold, he went ballistic without finding out, and he started giving them away. And I think that's when Siouxsie clocked him.
I stood there for a second and then looked at Kenny. Kenny looked at me and we just walked straight out. We actually walked down the road to a coffee shop and sat down there and tried to calm down. But it was just the last insult, really. It was a misunderstanding, as it turns out, but it was just the last straw.
We went straight to soundcheck, fully expecting to see them there. And, they didn't show, and they didn't show again.
They were replaced by former Slits drummer Peter Clark, affectionately nicknamed Budgie. This trio remained the core lineup until the group disbanded in 1996, where the guitarist role functioned as a revolving door for players, some of whom went on to become highly regarded in their own right. Well respected in their home country, the Banshees wouldn't receive their flowers in the States until the 1980s were practically over, by which point alternative music had a more prominent commercial presence that American audiences could identify the group's music with.
But recently they are back with their 10th album. It is called Peep Show. Well, they've had great success in Europe with this album, and I think they're going to continue with that success here in America. Well, they've decided to come down to Club MTV and show us just what they're doing. Please welcome Siouxsie and the Banshees and Peekaboo.
Steadily over time, the band would see their already impressive legacy solidified, earning an outpour of praise from critics and fellow musicians alike, to the extent they're now a celebrated act and highly influential, both on their contemporaries and the generations of artists that followed. The Banshees had a famous habit of cycling through guitarists almost every other record. By their sixth album, Hyena, they were on number 3. Robert Smith, who joined while on hiatus from The Cure. Smith himself had been a member 2 separate times, once in the late 70s, and then again in the mid-80s. Needless to say, the band had a bit of a curse when it came to hanging on to guitarists.
Again, we seem to bring out the best in people and then use them up like a sponge until they've got nothing much left to give, I suppose. I don't know. We tend to go through guitarists uncommonly often.
You mean you're some kind of vampire? Are you?
If you want to be comical, yes.
The Tinderbox era would be no different in this regard. It marked the first LP with guitarist John Valentine Carruthers, who actually made his debut nearly 2 years earlier, re-recording Robert Smith's parts for the Thorn EP. Smith had abruptly left the Banshees to reform The Cure, who were experiencing a wave of renewed success at the time.
Does the split bit and goes, so Susie is in a hole. But London Calling tracked her down recently as she was frantically rehearsing with her new guitarist. Wave.
Hi, babe. Hi.
We're rehearsing here for the eve of another tour in which another guitarist has bitten the dust, which is Robert Smith, and we're preparing someone else to die shortly. John Carruthers, John Valentine Carruthers, to be precise, is the new guitarist. And he's from a Sheffield-based group called Clock DVA, who aren't doing anything too much at the moment because they've sacked their singer.
While having to learn the band's catalog in only a limited time, Carruthers survived what Susie described as a baptism of fire, and because of his contributions, Tinderbox is arguably the last album in their discography that feels truly guitar-driven. It stands as the final flicker for their punk roots. Even then, their flame resonates with new colors, signaling the end of an era for the group. In fact, I would say this record sits at an interesting crossroads in both the band's career and the wider post-punk landscape. It sometimes feels closer in spirit to contemporaries like R.E.M. than to the original class of '77. If anything, the adversity presented by their unstable lineup made the band more adaptable over the course of their tenure.
Steve Severin, you have been with the group from the beginning. How have you survived? I mean, not you personally, but the group, and maintain its popularity when others have just disappeared?
I guess a big ingredient to that is having so many sort of personnel changes, so we've had to virtually reinvent the group a lot of times. And most of these personnel changes have been enforced upon us as opposed to us throwing out somebody because they weren't working properly.
By engaging with the more expressive elements of the post-punk genre, something the band helped cultivate themselves, they created a sound that didn't necessarily rely on a guitarist to function. Susie even likened the band to the titular portrait of the novel The Picture of Dorian Gray. We continue unblemished, while the guitarist bears all the scars.
It's a twister! It's a twister!
I've always been fascinated by album artwork and the many functions it serves, how it advertises a record's sound and themes, while also appreciating it as a standalone product of design in its own right. The cover of Tinderbox features an edited version of a famous photograph, loosely referred to as the Jasper Tornado. The photo was taken in 1927 near Jasper, Minnesota, by 16-year-old Lucille Hanberg, a South Dakota resident. Hanberg lived in the small rural town of Sherman, situated very close to the Minnesota border, where during a muggy and still afternoon, she spotted the storm a few miles away from across state lines. Pursuing the slow-moving funnel, she snapped multiple photographs with the hopes of winning first prize at a local state fair. What she captured would become one of the most iconic tornado photographs ever taken, effectively making herself one of the earliest amateur storm chasers in the process. Her photograph provides a rather complete and striking view of the tornado from its touchdown to its ascent into the storm cloud above. The barn in the foreground emphasizes its scale while also suggesting our own smallness in the face of powers beyond our control. The image has taken on new life outside of meteorology and has appeared on other famous album covers, including Stormbringer by Deep Purple and Bitches Brew by Miles Davis. Here it's repurposed again, literally capturing the band's turbulent energy during the time of its creation. I love how the cover is tinted with shifting hues of magenta, which is a perfect color to serve as a visual analog for the music itself, being that it's very lush and layered and at times extremely romantic. The photo's Midwestern location reminds me of the Wizard of Oz's initial Dust Bowl setting, which itself serves as an analogy for the Great Depression, a fitting touchstone, if indeed an influence at all, given this record's lyrical preoccupation with extreme weather. By peering into the cover, the listener is placed directly into Dorothy's shoes, with the Jasper Tornado acting as a portal, leading directly into the Banshee's world. My understanding of this period owes much to Billy Chainsaw, a writer and visual artist who worked for the band and closely documented their every move. He was also the editor of the Siouxsie and the Banshees File, a fan magazine chronicling the group's activities that provides a level of detail that was invaluable for discussing the album's creation. Issue 3 of said magazine offers an exhaustive account of the recording sessions alongside the tour dates that intersected with them. Needless to say, it was useful for researching and understanding the band's artistic intent and establishing a timeline of events. Beyond that, Mr. Chainsaw seems like a genuinely chill guy. Most of my information is sourced from issue 3 of the file, but also from the Siouxsie and the Banshees authorized biography by Mark Patris, as well as the Entranced biography by Brian Johns. Mr. Chainsaw's The File has since been chronicled on an online fan site, and I'm treating them as a primary resource despite them being archived versions. The archiver has interviewed Billy Chainsaw himself, which added needed credibility in my eyes. Also, a lot of the information lines up with release dates, tour dates, accounts from the band, and interviews from the time. Billy Chainsaw himself also appears in the authorized biography, so as far as I'm concerned, his word is gospel. After releasing the Thorn EP, the band played a handful of European dates before retreating during the winter months to begin writing new material. Their focus for the writing session would be to nail down the new songs in rehearsal rather than improvising material in the studio, which had been the case with their last few albums. This results in a collection of songs with stronger and more defined melodies comparatively. There also seems to be a conscious effort to recenter the guitar as the focus of the songwriting, most likely the result of their previous two albums experimenting with new instrumentation and relying less on traditional guitar work. It is the most direct successor to their 1981 opus, Juju, not that it was ever intended to be so, but stylistically the two share a lot on the surface, with their witchy, spacious, goth-infused post-punk sound. Both albums also benefited from having their material stage-tested and well-rehearsed before recording. This approach grants both projects an immediate cohesive energy that allows tracks to bleed into each other, much like the cover's wash of Analogous Colors suggests. It also highlights the unity, or at least the initial cohesion that resulted from the new lineup. Severin would directly compare both writing sessions in an interview. The situation at the moment is much more like it was at the Juju period, where me and John Magog would sit down together and write the songs from scratch. Mind you, it's not just me and John Carruthers. Budgie writes a hell of a lot of tunes, and you also get a lot of ideas from his drum style. The focus and productivity of these writing sessions would be absent in the pre-production sessions with Bob Ezrin, the album's ill-fated first producer. Chosen by the band for his work with Alice Cooper and Lou Reed, this proved to be a frustrating mismatch, with the band finding him too controlling, arrogant, and ultimately inert. You'll notice producers are a reoccurring problem throughout the album's creation, something Susie brings up often during interviews.
We're talking of, the 82 and so on. It's been quite a while since we've had an album from it. It's been about a year, and the next one's not coming out till April. So what's the delay been?
Well, we recorded Tinderbox last year in May in Berlin, and that was all fine. Then we came back to London to do some overdubs and finish it off, and we lost respect for the person we were working with. I mean, it just didn't work. And so the rest of the year was spent looking for someone to finish it off with. Meanwhile, the tour came up in October, and the knee came out. And it was in December we'd found someone to work with called Steve Churchard, and there's actually a vocal on the album done with my leg up, sitting down in a couch. Spot the vocal with the couch.
The band paused rehearsals to play their first UK show in nearly a year on April 10th, 1985. An anti-heroin charity gig sponsored by Peter Townshed's 00 Charity at the St. James Church in London. Headlining with a 90-minute set, this performance would also be the live debut for much of the album's material. After the charity gig, the band spent 2 days at Matrix Studios in London working on demos, before kicking off pre-production work with Hugh Jones, the album's second producer at the Namas Complex, from April 15th through the 26th, where they had also written 2 additional songs, Candyman and Land's End. On May 4th, the band flew to Hansa Studio in Berlin, recording the bulk of the album over the next 28 days. While there, they also completed B-side Lullaby, along with Stephen's then unreleased demo, Star-Crossed Lovers. Their final day in Germany, June 1st, was reserved for mixing. However, their brief time in the city came with its own complications that made the recording session less than rewarding. We went to Hansa Studio, where Bowie had made Low, also The Idiot, and we had a pretty miserable time. Hugh Jones was an engineer, which turned out to be a bonus because with everything falling to bits in the studio, he'd have to spend 2 hours a day repairing equipment. The place wasn't how I expected at all. It was the most unromantic place you could imagine, considering it had such a mystique about it. But you could see the Berlin Wall from the window. The room where we recorded in Germany wasn't soundproofed or anything, and they had horrible JBL monitors. When we went back to England, the guitars didn't seem to have any presence or clarity at all, so we just kept the drums. That was all. We were there for a whole month. The recording process was frustrating, not being able to get the bass and guitar tracks recorded at the same time. Steven found it impossible to stay in the studio because it was too hot for him. And besides, there was only one pair of headphones working. He'd smash the rest up. Tinderbox was a really tough album, a cataclysmic album, both for the band and for me personally. That's when I had my first major scare. I was scraped off the street by a medical crew. During the stressful studio sessions in Berlin, Budgie hit a personal breaking point with alcohol, an episode recounted in the band's authorized biography. A night of heavy drinking escalated after an argument between him and Susie in their hotel room. In her frustration with him and his frequent overconsumption, she kicked a glass cabinet, leaving her foot bloodied up and Budgie blacking out in the gutter for the first time. The two had been dating since the early 1980s. This was something of an open secret within the band, with them keeping their relationship low profile initially, fearing it would create a power dynamic within the group. Their precarious situation, combined with a lifestyle that required him to be on the road constantly, surely took its toll on the drummer. Waking up hospitalized and on a drip, he realized his drinking was out of control. Reflecting on the chaos he had caused the night before, Budgie decided to quit alcohol, marking the start of his sobriety journey and a serious turning point in his approach to life and the band.
In a small studio, Cities in Dust, the music was playing, and that's when I wrote the song. I mean, it was supposed to be a B-side, but we decided to make it a clean A-side.
It's worth noting that the album's eventual lead single, Cities in Dust, did not manifest during the Hansa Studio sessions. After leaving Berlin, the band entered Garden Studios, focusing solely on guitar overdubs, before embarking on a short tour of Italy and France. This short summer break from recording proved creatively fruitful, as the tour facilitated a visit to Pompeii, which would serve as the lyrical inspiration for Cities in Dust. It was also this time in Italy that cracks with Hugh Jones began to form, with him sending the band a tape for a proposed final mix of Parties Fall, and the group squarely rejecting it. On July 29th, the band headed back to Matrix Studio to record B-sides for the potential lead single, while Jones continued work at Garden Studios. The A-side contenders being Parties Fall and The Sweetest Chill. What would eventually become the music for Cities in Dust began as a drum loop and keyboard demo Severin brought in to the studio. After working out the music and lyrics with Susie in just a few hours, what started as a B-side evolved into the final A-side. Both Cities in Dust and the new B-side and Execution were mixed on August 1st. The group reconvened with Jones at Garden Studios to continue mixing work on August 3rd. until touring obligations at Belgium's annual Seaside Festival in Dieppe on the 10th. This was followed by another headline show at the Monty-Marsan Festival in southern France. Around the 12th, the band returned to Garden Studios to hear Hugh Jones' progress on the mix for The Sweetest Chill. Afterwards, it was decided that Jones simply wasn't cutting it, and the band promptly fired him for a myriad of reasons. They were unimpressed with his mixes, frustrated by his slow pace on overdubs, and they had discovered he had been showing unfinished material to Polydor against the band's explicit instructions. I imagine none of these actions flew over well with such a creatively headstrong group. Steve Churchard was then brought on as the new producer at Polydor's suggestion, and between September and December of 1985, and after many delays, the remaining songs were finalized with the band's input at Matrix and Air Studios in London. The final production work by Steve Churchard, known for his work with Big Country, is noticeably more polished than what was found on past albums. This, combined with a batch of well-rehearsed tracks, gives the album an overall clarity, both in its composition and sonically, that its predecessor desperately lacked. Cities and Dust, the public's first taste of the album, was released during this final stretch on October 18th. Even with the lead single released and the album being quickly finished, it wouldn't all be smooth sailing.
Loosely say that it is based around the weather, not just the weather. I mean, situations, events, and people's reactions to different weather. And so Tinderbox was an apt title for it, I think.
The eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD is a historical event that has permeated popular consciousness. Its tale of destruction was preserved from the ashes of antiquity by archaeologists over 1,500 years later, in 1863, when the first systematic and preservation-oriented excavations were conducted by Italian archaeologist Giuseppe Fiorelli. For those wondering what a tinderbox actually is, it's a toolkit consisting of materials for starting fires, such as flint, steel, and char cloth. Candle holders were often affixed atop to these lids, as people used wax candles to maintain flame and light other fires before the invention of friction matches in 1826. Afterwards, these tools became less prominent in daily household life. One can make a surface-level comparison between the tinderbox and the plaster castings that dot the ruins of Pompeii. Both represent relics of a past era. This idea of civilization being left in the dustbin of history sits at the heart of Cities and Dust. The song, for just a moment, confronts its listeners, inviting them to consider the possibility and eventuality that their way of life, values, culture, and architecture are all up for grabs when the chaos of time evokes havoc. Perhaps, in the not-so-distant future, someone could be examining the ashes of our current, deeply divided world. The album's title wasn't chosen until January 1986, after mixing had been finished, with its origin from an unused song lyric written by Severin. However, the tracklist subject matter seemed to naturally coalesce around the title. A tinderbox is often used as a metaphor for a catalytic event. The first time I remember hearing this word was in the context of learning history, where the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand was considered the tinderbox that ignited Europe, leading to escalating conflicts, alliances, and declarations of war that spiraled into World War I. I think this historical anecdote helps shed some light on the album's core theme. If there is a grand thesis to be made on the album, it can be found in its title. Its intent is to expound on the nature of cause and effect, using extreme weather and the environment as metaphor. This is the artistic marriage between its title and the album's cover art. As the quality of musicianship increased steadily with each album, so did Susie's voice. Over time, she learned to craft more defined vocal melodies and demonstrated greater control of her dynamics, gasping, belting, and growling with precision. On Tinderbox, her vocals sound more upfront in the mix, and on many tracks, including Cities and Dust, they are the guiding force for the entire song. Susie sings from the perspective of someone akin to an archaeologist or bystander. We found you hiding. We found you lying. Recounting the victim's last moments before being overtaken by volcanic debris. Were you praying at the Laris shrine? Her lyrics are not a cynical retrospective, they are a humanizing lament for such a tragic loss of life. The famous stone bodies of Pompeii are actually lifelike casts of victims who were covered in layers of volcanic ash. As their bodies decomposed underneath those layers, hollow spaces formed. When Fiorelli conducted his excavation, he noticed these recesses contained human remains, correctly deducing that these voids were once human bodies. He then created plaster casts of these hollow recesses to capture something akin to the photographs of those final moments. The song itself was a modest hit, just shy of the top 20 in the UK, and strangely number 17 on the US Hot Dance Club chart. Despite not being their first single to chart in the US, it would become their most impactful performance there until 1991. No doubt this was aided by its distinctive and extremely catchy Roland drum loop and its insanely powerful vocal hook. The emphasis on her expanded vocal capacity set a trend for the remaining albums, placing Susie's voice at the forefront and making it the primary selling point, rather than highlighting any guitarist or relying on a simple genre label. Her singing really carried the group toward the end of their run, in my opinion. The historical event Cities and Dust draws inspiration from is also likely a factor to its longevity. The track adopts the cataclysmic ubiquity of its subject and makes it its own. Its music is a playful mixture of catchy rhythms and textural guitar stabs that complement Susie's observational poetry on morality and antiquity. It stands as a left-field pop success that, in my opinion, the band had not achieved since Happy House. Our friend Mr. Chainsaw was responsible for the single cover, which apparently had to have its 7-inch label artwork censored for depicting an erotic image from a Pompeii artifact, apparently a man and a woman in a sexual position. After completing the lead single ahead of the album, it was rushed out for release on October 18th, with the band subsequently embarking on their longest UK tour since 1981. During the first of 3 shows at the Hammersmith Odeon on October 24th, Susie injured herself with a bad landing after leaping through the air, collapsing during a performance of Christine, screaming in pain, with her knee completely popped out of socket.
Panting this week to see Susie and the Banshees playing live. Unfortunately, as you've probably all been reading, Susie has injured her knee, but she's come hobbling all the way up to Newcastle to talk to us anyway, and we'll be playing on the 100th show on the 4th of April. So how is your poor knee?
Well, it's not mended completely yet, and I'm doing lots of physio, and
How did you do it? Did you fall off something and just twist it?
It was at the first Hammersmith Odeon concert, and was one of those inspired leaps and twists, and I landed badly on the monitor wires.
In a remarkable display of showmanship and fearing the financial loss that would accrue if the tour were canceled, she continued with a majority of the tour dates, now aided by a glorious skull-capped cane, a gift from Severin. Allegedly, just a day after the accident, bootlegs were already circulating of the performance capturing Susie's cries of agony. Some fans are kind of assholes. However, touring with her injury caused further complications and lengthened the recovery process. Sue later recounted this period as a time of helplessness, having to maintain a positive front as the face of the group, while her debilitating physical injury would only weigh heavier as a phantom pain would resurface after the recording sessions in Berlin. Opening track Candyman is Susie's expression on the unspeakability of child abuse, managing this paradox through its sincerity and revulsion at the subject. Susie creates a noir with her lyrical prowess, as descriptions of the perpetrator are scored by the Banshees' newest member, John Carruthers' slick and menacing guitar work. Sickly sweet his poison seeks. For the young ones who don't understand the danger in his hands, with a jaundiced wink, see his cunning slink. Oh, trust in me, my pretty one. Come walk with me, my helpless one. As children, we have a limited agency over the circumstances that shape our lives. Our development is influenced not only by our own growth, but also by the decisions made by others. Where we live and the communities we become a part of are determined by our parents and other authority figures. This natural reliance on authority requires children to place an immense amount of trust in those around them, making them amongst the most vulnerable members of our society. I believe Candyman's placement as the intro track serves as a warning call, a cautionary tale of a breach of that trust, painting an image with song of a dubious character whose demeanor betrays their victims.
Period of time, I think it's 1921, when he arrived in London, and they were having one of these freak droughts in London. And previously it had been hailstoning and snowing in spring. And this heat wave caused all the people to evacuate the town for shores, for the lakes. In their frustration, in their complete desperation, they tried to fire cannons into the sky to, I suppose, either thinking that the sound would break the cloud or the actual cannonball would pierce the cloud. And it was May 85 that we actually went into Berlin, Hansa Studios, to record.
Extreme weather is the interwoven motif throughout Tinderbox, and Cannons embodies the album's theme imaginatively, with the lyrics depicting an active conflict between humanity and the natural world. Susie's singing and lyricism are once again an excellent feature of the song. Troubled weather's on its way. Tempests threaten us today. There's no respite from dark nights, just the fantasy of spring. Once more again in the line of fire, hovers the praying sky. The cannon's aim jabs at the eye, heralding the rain. I believe the program Sue was referring to was on T.S. Eliot's poem, The Wasteland, which was partially inspired by his own experiences with extreme weather in England during the 1920s. I haven't been able to find any instance where Elliot explicitly mentions cannon fire as a means to manipulate weather. The idea apparently stems from superstitious beliefs about the effects of cannon fire on storm clouds. According to John Carruthers, in Spanish medieval times, if it hadn't rained and the crops were suffering, then they pointed cannons into the sky with the hopes of bursting rain clouds. Budgie's drumming on cannons is also remarkable. His rhythms function as a call and response with Susie's voice. When she sings "The Cannons Crack," he mirrors the imagery using his kit. With just his playing alone, you can almost visualize the conflict, with man attempting to fight nature's cruel indifference with ingenuity. At one point, he even becomes a Foley artist. Susie mentions a fire engine as a lyric in the song, and Budgie responds with a frantically ringing triangle. I'm not sure if this is just a coincidence, but triangles were historically used as sirens to alert local fire departments of emergencies. Budgie's drumming performances are consistently great throughout the album. His patterns are varied and interesting and serve as the backbone to most of the tracks, while also adding an element of danceability that their past records just didn't have. It's surprising that Cannons was never considered as a single. Its combination of storytelling and colorful percussive work make it one of the more compelling yet accessible tracks on Tinderbox.
Did you know, Putnam, that more murders are committed at 92 degrees Fahrenheit than any other temperature? I read an article once. Lower temperatures, people are easygoing. Over 92, it's too hot to move, but just 92, people get irritable.
92 Degrees is another track that concretely lays out the album's themes. The song draws layered inspiration from literature and myth, exploring the concept of man versus nature through the effects of prolonged heat on individual behavior. If Cannons depicts a struggle resulting in human perseverance, 92 Degrees is the inverse, humanity succumbing to nature's destructive sway. In Ray Bradbury's Touched with Fire, two retired salesmen, now acting as self-employed firemen, attempt to save people's lives from certain murder during an intruding heat wave. They do this out of the belief that murder peaks at 92 degrees, and in trying to intervene on the behalf of a particularly agitated older woman, nearly cause her murder themselves. The song opens with dialogue sampled from the sci-fi film It Came from Outer Space, a movie based on Bradbury's short story The Foghorn. These references expand the album's scope, examining man as a destructive force, just as effective as any twister or volcanic eruption. While there has been much research linking the topics of heat and crime rates, I don't think the exact science is the purpose of the song. Instead, the track uses heat symbology to explore human tension and fear, just as Bradbury does in Touched with Fire. Musically, heat's symbolic power also carries into the composition. In 92 Degrees, the tempo is gradually inflamed by imagery of red lines creeping and oceans of lava bubbling beneath the surface. Synthetic textures and instruments are used tastefully across Tinderbox, but are especially effective here, highlighting the tension at just the right time before the track's crescendo. Susie's belting is foreboding, underscored by John Carruthers' layered guitar, while Severin's deep, rhythmic bass holds the whole arrangement together. The chorus is one of my favorites on the record. I'll use this opportunity to highlight John Carruthers' guitar work on the album, as it's notable here on 92 Degrees. His style is precise and intricate, enhancing atmosphere without overpowering the track. This contrasts greatly with John Magog, the Banshees' second guitarist, whose flashier and more aggressive style often dominated tracks. It's a shame John Carruthers only stayed a member of the Banshees for one more project. I think he adds a lot to the group in the studio, and his contributions feel more substantial and obvious than anything Robert Smith ever brought to the group. Severin sums up his role in the band nicely. We did try to give him scope to do what he wanted to, but because the guitarist role in the band carried so much baggage, the burden of the past weighed heavier on him than we ever realized. He didn't lead a song at all, but he would put really good parts on it, picking up on what was already there. This group had like 4 different guitarists named John, by the way. I just find that very funny. This is about a visitation from a lover's spirit who is already dead. Someone who comes back from the grave and greets her as a lover. I don't think Sue wrote it from personal experience, but you never know. Whenever she tries to write a love song, it always comes out from a very different standpoint. It's not exactly Bonnie Tyler, though Sue can do a great Bonnie impression. Fire symbology is used frequently on the album. I mean, it is called Tinderbox after all. But the Sweetest Chill defies this by utilizing fire's poetic opposite. Its lyrics conjure frigid specters whose chilling presence also brings with them a warmth of nostalgic yearning. I think it's interesting that on the one track where coldness serves as its lyrical inspiration, heat is still present, recontextualized as a fire of the heart, stoked by a loved one's memory. The song is a swooning commemoration to humanity's perseverance, specifically through the powers of connection, memory, and spirit. The song is also another dance rock-oriented track, not dissimilar to Cannon's, and I think it would have made for a logical follow-up for a second single, contrasting Cities in Dust's fiery fury with a cooler, more melodic follow-up. John Carruthers' guitar work is also excellent here. His repetitious, flangered guitar tones are bright yet jagged and create a hypnotic pattern that the rhythm section slots into beautifully. It's a relatively straightforward song, which is actually somewhat uncommon for the Banshees, but it's also one of the catchiest in their catalog. Severin, by himself, flew to Amsterdam on August 28th to meet with Chris Kimsey, who was contacted to produce a single mix of The Sweetest Chill for a release that never manifested. This version would eventually appear as a bonus track in the 2009 remaster, and for what it's worth, I think it's pretty neat. This Unrest is a musically fluid track that slips between moments of steely aggression and lurid mystery with little effort. The song omits a conventional verse-chorus-verse structure, instead revolving around 4 distinct verses. After each section, the music changes to reflect the tone of Susie's singing. A nice push and pull forms between the airy keyboards and choir pads, and the abrasive, claustrophobic guitar tones that disrupt them. This Unrest is where I believe the mask drops, as its lyrics abandon the album's thematic pretense, instead channeling the group's raw, volatile energy as the true intellectual driver. The band sounds frustrated, even pissed off, and their internal aggression is allowed to bleed straight into the creative ether unfiltered. It's also a moment of meta-commentary not available on other tracks, giving a deeper look into the group without having to parse Susie's poetry. It was an inward-looking album. A lot of songs were about things that were wrong internally. This Unrest, Parties Fall, Land's End. The lyrics also can't help but remind me of something often brought up in interviews for Tinderbox, the band's 10-year anniversary, which happened around the time of its release.
There's a lot of myth creating because of the decade now. And it was just a very dangerous time to live in, really. Although that we and other people were making statements, they weren't accepted, whereas now they are.
What kind of statements?
I mean, not slogans, but I mean actually making a statement just by the way you looked or by the way you sounded. It was very much anti what was expected.
While many critics seemed too eager to look back with nostalgia at the inception of the punk movement, Siouxsie, one of British punk's most visible progenitors, seemed frustrated by the group's tethering to the genre label and history.
I expect they're pissed off.
Do you enjoy that Born Again interest on that 10 years anniversary of punk?
Not really.
Yeah.
It's not my style.
Even worse was the insinuation by their 10th year the band had become played out or predictable. So perhaps at its core, this unrest is the Banshees' response to the constant lineup changes, the myopic, pessimistic, critical dogging, or even the possibility of ending the group entirely. We were in Berlin recording this track when, halfway through, the Land's End tragedy happened. The lyrics don't correspond to that. It's more a lover's leap for eternity. The Banshees released Cities in Dust in October of 1985, a month before a real-life volcanic catastrophe in Colombia. The Nevado del Ruiz volcano erupted on November 13th, 1985, triggering massive mud flows that buried the town of Amaro and killed over 23,000, making the newly minted single sadly topical. Another such grim coincidence is that of the Land's End tragedy, where on May 6, 1985, 11 students on a school trip to Land's End in Cornwall would climb down a cliffside to play on some rocks near the sea. Despite sea conditions appearing calm, a massive wave swept the group, pulling 4 boys into the ocean, where they drowned. Their deaths were concluded to be the result of misadventure, though subsequent inquiry into the accident sharply criticized the trip's supervision and planning. As a result, new legislation was passed mandating stricter safety guidelines for school trips in the United Kingdom. Take a walk with me, down by the sea. The final lyrics we hear on the album, when separated from the darker associations imposed on them, are some of the only lines that elicit a sense of harmony. Siouxsie imagines the destiny of 2 star-crossed lovers, with fire appearing for the final time as metaphor, comparing their fatal attraction to that of a moth drawn irresistibly to a flame. The album was positively received by critics back in 1986, and its positive reception has only grown with time. It's a shame this incarnation of the band was so short-lived. John Carruthers would stay on board for one more project, the band's cover record, Through the Looking Glass, released on March 2nd, 1987, before departing unceremoniously due to personality conflicts. He would be replaced by guitarist John Klein, as well as multi-instrumentalist Martin McCarrick for their next album. Despite lacking the ubiquity here in the United States as they do in the UK, I feel the band's influence has been subtle, but at the same time quite prolific. This year marks the 40th anniversary of Tinderbox, and the band recently found themselves in headlines for receiving writing credits for Lady Gaga's Abracadabra, as its pre-chorus is an interpolation of the intro to Spellbound. I think it's pretty cool that the band are still getting their flowers decades later. The album's message of cause and effect has indeed had an effect on me. I was fascinated by the history and the stories behind these songs, and was inspired to explore more into the record. And in many ways, I think this is my most ambitious video editing project to date. And with that, I have nothing else to say on the record. I've exercised all of my thoughts, and there are just a few people who I would like to thank. You already know who you are. The writing and editing for this project was very intense, and I look forward to doing another project like this in the future, hopefully on a smaller scale, so I can focus a little more on one topic as opposed to trying to branch out and do all these other things. But with that, thank you very much for watching my video, and I appreciate your time. Have a radiant good night.